I'm so glad I washed my hair.
Yeah, you're gonna be famous. You're gonna be
That's
famous after
crucial.
this. So
Lovely.
I love it. There's Phil. All right, you also welcome to our Crucial Conversation. This is, I think, our second Zoom Crucial Conversation. Rob, thank God for Rob. We had him scheduled like the day the pandemic happened to come to church and do a Crucial Convo. And so that didn't happen. So we've been in the midst of, getting it rescheduled. And I'm so glad that it worked out for today to hear from Rob. Our Crucial Conversations are our time to talk about hard and important life issues. And I say every time, this is not an invitation to argue. It's an invitation to learn and to ask questions. So I invite you all to come with just a posture of curiosity into this space. So I'm so glad that you're here. Rob, I'm going to have you introduce yourself. We're so glad that you have joined us. And I'm going to give it to you to take it away.
Wow, how fun. Thanks, Megan. I appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody spending a little time together this morning. I look forward to a conversation. I have lots and lots of slides I can show you, but I'd much rather look at your faces and talk. Here's the history of the organization that I'm part of. I'm actually one of the founders. It's known as the San Diego River Park Foundation. And we were founded in 2000 when there was a 34 million gallon sewage spill of untreated sewage into Mission Valley. Now, I don't know about you, but 34 million gallons is I can't wrap my head around. So imagine going down to Lowe's or Home Depot and getting a blue or orange bucket. Okay, you got one of those? Fill it up with raw sewage. Oh, grab another one. Okay, so you got two of those. And now give one to every single person in San Diego County. That's about 34 million gallons of raw sewage. So imagine that. Can you think about that? So that's kind of a context for us as an organization. Our passion, our mission is to connect people with the San Diego River in a way that it's cared for and loved. And it's a very simple premise that this river, which is really the birthplace not only of European settlement on the West Coast, but of Native American history in San Diego County, is largely forgotten, right? 20 years ago, where we went down to Mission Valley, and now I grew up in San Diego. So let's go back up a little bit. I grew up in San Diego, and if some of you have been around San Diego, remember Mission Valley used to be what? Dairy farms, and before my time, my mom would tell me stories, and my dad about, that there was, go down there, and gosh, there's this great corn stand, and she remembers getting the corn, and she'll sit there and visualize eating it, and her mouth, just kind of gets, she gets so happy, because it was the best corn around, and that was the Mission Valley of the 1950s, right? And it slowly began to change. And when it changed from the agriculture to kind of regional malls, right? Mission Valley Shopping Center went in, a stadium was built, and then another stadium was built. That's the Mission Valley I remember, which is when I remember Buffalo in Mission Valley, if any of you remember that. Over at the old, I think it was Hazard, had his brickyard there, and they had Buffalo too or something. I have a vague memory when I was a little kid. And all of a sudden, that place kind of transformed into what you see today, where the river was a problem. It was something that you complained about. You filled it in. You took all its stand out, to build San Diego, and then you started to kind of put it behind your building, right? So there's a lot of fences and signs that say "Stay out," and yet it's this cultural and civic treasure, which most communities in the world celebrate their rivers, but for some reason, our San Diego River was something that people wanted to forget about, right? So that's the context for us. And we found the river 20 years ago now that people had largely forgotten. And when a sewer spill of that magnitude, the biggest in the state's history, happened, there was no outcry. Now imagine if that happened in, pick your favorite place, Balboa Park, right? People would go, "Oh my, stop this, it's crazy, do something," right? But nobody seemed to care, let alone even notice. So the context for our organization was to re-look at the river in a way that it would celebrate, add value to our lives, but also to treasure its ecological values, right? That's the San Diego River, okay? So over time, now if you sit and close your eyes for a moment, do a little exercise here, picture the San Diego River. Now, Jill, you can't do this because I know what you're going to think about, but close your eyes, and when you think of the San Diego River, I bet most of you will think of probably two things. It's a flood. You can't get to Fashion Valley because it just rained, and you're cursing somebody who designed these silly roads, right? Or you probably have a vision of homelessness or trash, pollution, those sort of things, right?
It's in there too. Thank you. See you.
Yeah, well, so a lot of you then start to kind of think about it, and maybe you have a different layer, right? Oh, I know, you know, Mission Trails Regional Park or Mission Bay Park, or I like to hike or go out in the Cleveland National Forest, or gosh, maybe you've gone boating or fishing out on one of the large reservoirs. But this is all the San Diego River, from Julian roughly all the way down to Dog Beach and OB, just stone's throw from here, is the San Diego River. And that's what we're trying to do, is to celebrate that river and turn it into a place. Now, our discussion today is about one of those issues, homelessness. And again, you know, just kind of do a mental exercise. How many people, just raise your hand, I think I can see you all. How many people think that homelessness is an issue for the San Diego River? Anybody doesn't think it is? Okay, anybody have no clue? Like no idea? You know? Yeah, so most of you do. Okay. At one point, many years ago, and we're a nature organization. We care about birds and bunnies, right? That's where our values are. We want everybody to love birds and bunnies like we do. And I can show you some awesome pictures of all the conservation work we do to protect the birds, the badgers, the mountain lions, the foxes, all of the different critters up and down this amazing river. And how did we get involved with homelessness, right? So many years ago, I still remember to this day when I first got involved 20 years ago, I had already been a volunteer on the river. I really didn't think about the river much, but I was out there helping on a little tiny piece of it in Mission Valley. And my story is that we used to go around Penasquitos Canyon and other places as volunteers. And the San Diego Police Department called us and asked us to come down into Mission Valley to help them with an issue with homelessness. What did they think? Well, they were finding a lot of people were living or hiding in places that they thought should be just clear-cutted and along the river. And that's how I really got involved with the river originally. And there was a small group called the Friends of Mission Valley Preserve, a little thing that I helped get actually dedicated as a park close to 20 years ago, 51 acres in Mission Valley. And so anyways, that's how we got connected. And we were one of the volunteers out there. At that point, I was a volunteer, and we were out there removing some non-native stuff. And all of a sudden, we kind of thought the river smelled a little bit that day. And then lo and behold, a couple weeks later, we had heard that there was this 34 million gallon sewer spill. And ever since there, for 20 years, I've been addressing homelessness along the river. We were never good at it. We never really thought it was our deal. We thought somebody else would take care of it, but we knew it was an issue, right? So, gosh, about maybe 15, 14 years ago, we started to get a little bit more involved because we kind of grew up a little bit and got more sophisticated in how we wanted to work toward a trash-free river. That was our goal. It was a way to engage people. We could organize volunteers. We had volunteers, like some days we had 400 volunteers out picking trash up along the San Diego River. Amazing. We've removed over 3 million pounds of trash from the river today over that time. 3 million pounds, that's a lot of trash. And there's more to do. And people say, wait a second, haven't you cleaned the river by now, right? And we found that in the area that we're really focused on, that about 1 million pounds of trash comes into the river each and every year. 1 million pounds. And so if we pick up 100 or 200,000 pounds, we're not making much of a dent, are we? So we have to work with a lot of partners. And so over time, we started to realize that homelessness was the largest source of that trash, right? So here's your first question for you. Maybe we can talk about it a little bit. Is your thoughts about that? It's like there are people living in the riverbed in encampments in places where legally they're not allowed to live. We as a nature organization want a clean, healthy environment, right? People want to love the river, but not be afraid of the river. And homelessness, unfortunately, for good or bad, for a lot of people is the perception, or reality in some case, of not being safe. So maybe we can have just a little thought about that. How would you approach the issue where you're a nature organization and one of your largest challenges is homelessness? Anybody have any thoughts about that? How you personally would approach that?
Great question, Rob. It's a great question. If you all just want to raise your hand, then, if you have something you want to say. Marie, your hand got right up there. You've got something to say.
Well, coincidentally, I work for an organization that we help homeless and low-income families. We're downtown on Market Street. We're 2459 Market. We're a little yellow house, but we have food and clothes for homeless. And I know possibly some of that trash might have ended up from our place, unfortunately. But lately, there's been a lot of crackdown, but they've actually turned a hotel into a shelter for homeless folks. So some of our homeless people are starting to live in a hotel, which is after COVID. Pre-COVID, they weren't living there, but I would love to exchange information, and you can always send people to our organization. Doesn't mean that we'll be able to place them in a home, but at least it's one step. I just wanted to put that plug. We're New Day Urban Ministries, and if you want to give them, a part of the problem is having people be able to get from Mission Valley to downtown.
Mm-hmm. Just
Thank
so
you,
everyone
Mary.
knows, New Day Urban Ministries are Presbyterians in the house. That is formerly they were known as PUM, Presbyterian Urban Ministry. So just so you know, it's the organization. Our church has partnered with them for a lot of years. So thank you for being here, Marie, and thank you for that.
Yeah, don't know if anybody else wanted to comment. Yeah. Oh, wait, there's a familiar face. Julie.
Hi.
How
Yeah,
are you?
so I'm doing good. I've known about San Diego River Park Foundation, everyone, since Axel, my son, was at High Tech High Middle. And if you go on Amazon, they wrote the book Nico the Gnatcatcher and the Upside Down River. I'll
That's
post
right.
that in the chat so you can see that. I think for me, sort of, if it was my organization, Rob, you've already done it, but I would just say this, just the perception of how we think about people who are impacted by homeless and the relationship we have with them. And, are they also a client? I mean, are they also the people that use the river? Are they human? Um, so that first big hurdle around fear are they part of the process, or are they something to do to or do with? I think that's my main thought about how I would start that. And I know, of course, San Diego Park Foundation does that.
Yep. Thanks, Julie. Well, I thought I saw another hand, but I'll jump in. That's actually where we started. I must admit, early on, and I hate to even say things like this, but this is what I heard was, throw the bums out, block them up, just get rid of them. Doesn't really matter. And it breaks your heart because they're people and they are part of the community, aren't they? So, our vision has always been. Oh, there we go. I was lost
You
for a
cut
second
out.
there.
You cut out just a minute.
Yeah, sorry about that. Looks like my internet is a little unstable, so I will have to repeat things occasionally. Maybe I apologize for that. But our thought has always been, I'm not sure what you heard, but is that they are people. They are part of the community, and in fact, they are the folks that need help. I remember when I went to Washington D.C., we've been very fortunate that over the years we've received a couple of national awards. I'll tell you a little short story. I was invited back to the White House to receive an award on behalf of our organization, and I went with some friends that were worked at the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, and they had nominated us for this national award. And so I went back there with one of their senior people, and he walked me through. His name was Bill Steele. He's passed away since then. And he said, "Okay, so sit here. And if the president is going to come in, because we didn't know he was supposed to be there, they'll stop everything, put his seal up, and then he'll come in. So that's how you'll know if he'll be here." So we just sat there waiting for about 2 hours. Is he going to show up? And he never did. But it was such an honor to receive an award. And when I was back there and subsequent conversations with various departments in DC, we have always raised homelessness as an environmental justice issue. And we believe strongly that it is an environmental justice issue that gets no attention from that perspective. And it is so important that you have, you know, your values locked up in terms of how you think about this issue. So we for several years kind of tried to hope other people would address it. I mean, there was nothing happening, no attention to it, you know, along the San Diego riverbed, and yet the stunning number was 10 to 20% of the unsheltered population in the city of San Diego lived in the San Diego riverbed. 10 to 20%.
Still does.
No, it doesn't.
Oh, really?
And I'll talk about that shortly.
Thanks. I'd like to.
I appreciate that comment because that's perception, and that's what Megan had mentioned. Is we really are working hard to address that. And there's some good news here, and there's still some lingering terrible news. But that was the perception, and in order to make people feel safe along the river, a lot of people fear people, and especially people that don't look like them in some way or another, right? And so homelessness was something we dealt with a lot. At some point, we just decided, what can we do? What role can we play? We are not social service providers. We are not experts. Although, funny enough, when I worked in the mayor's office way back when in the city of San Diego, one of my policy areas was homelessness. So I actually did know a little bit about it. And I was able to apply some of those relationships to addressing the issue. And what we decided, what we do really, really well is document the health of the river. We are considered the experts on the health of the river. And so we took what we did, which was about trash, and converted that over into documenting encampments. Now, I hate the term encampment, but I haven't found a better term. But encampments to us can be anywhere where anybody lives overnight along the river. So sometimes that's a bedroll, sometimes it's a sheet of cardboard, sometimes it's a structure. I've come across structures which are just incredible. Two-story structures with, you know, people have brought in batteries, probably stolen, but who knows, to set up kitchens and all of the lights and all of these different things. It's really amazing, the ingenuity of some folks. And sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's 20 or more people. You know, to us, it was more about where people lived. And if we have a second, I'm going to steal the screen. Megan, is that all right? I don't know if I'm allowed to.
Go for it. You should be able to.
Let's see if I can pull up something. Hopefully this is the right one. Can you all see that screen?
Yeah.
Is that showing up? Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is our data. And anybody can see this if you're interested. You probably can see the address up. If not, I can put it in the chat room or in the chat. This is our data mapping system. And if I click on a whole bunch of stuff, you see that? Did that pop up a bunch of new stuff? Can you see that? Okay. Yeah. So the yellow things are what we call sunshines. Those are the things where our volunteers, led by our staff, have gone out and cleaned up parts of the river. And again, keep in mind, we've removed over 3 million pounds of trash along the river. We're very active on it. We have teams out there a couple days a week. If I start to steal things away, and if you just look at encampment trash, is what we call it in this system. We just didn't relabel it. These are places, and you can see right now, in the areas that we map, there are, I think it says 93 encampments along the San Diego River. But I got to tell you, right now in the city of San Diego, this is city of San Diego. The river continues on. Look in the city of Santee. You see that? All of these little dots here. I'll zoom in a little bit. So the city of Santee, you can see all these little purplish little dots. Those are active encampments that have been mapped within the last 2 weeks along the San Diego River. Look at that.
Wow.
Okay. And it's a stunning amount of people living along the riverbed in the city of Santee. Now, if you go to the city of San Diego, cruising down the river, Don't get sick on me. So here's the old stadium. You can see there's a couple here, a couple here, a couple under 163. Here's Fashion Valley right there, right? And then a couple more here. This is kind of a hidden piece of property, really kind of cool. And that's about it. There's a couple under I-5. So I'm going to come back so I can talk to you because I didn't want to share screen too much there. But the notion is that from that 10 to 20%, the number has changed over time significantly. Now, what happened? A lot of work, right? So we took the data and we went to the powers that be and shared the data. It got to the point where it's kind of cool. When, you know, the point in time count, have any of you participated in We All Count, the annual count in January, February of the active or the people experiencing homelessness in San Diego? Some of you may have participated in that. We actually started to do it for the San Diego River because it wasn't being counted. And over time, we then led that effort, and now we are the only people doing it. And the San Diego Regional Task Force on the Homeless, you know, depends upon our data, which is super cool because we actually know where everybody is. We can just kind of go out and redo it. And over time, we've really learned a lot. And so here's kind of the next point, maybe for some conversation. Is the sort of people that we're running into are chronic homeless. And I'll give you an example. There was one time that the city of San Diego used to have, now Mayor Gloria has changed things, but in the past, the city's approach was police first. So the police would be the first point of contact from a safety perspective of people experiencing homelessness in the San Diego riverbed. And there was one time, and they would go out and they had a homeless outreach team, which by and large ended up, it started out as a great idea. It was clinicians and a whole team of people, and it ended up being one or two cops. And they work really hard, and they're great, well-meaning people. But the reality is it's a police-first approach. And that works often, and for the chronic homeless, it doesn't. And so the chronic homeless in the San Diego riverbed, according to the San Diego Housing Commission, true experts in this, have indicated that these are the people that really, really, really don't want to see anybody. They want to be left alone. They do not want services. And that was confirmed. The police went out one time, I remember them telling me this, made 17 different contacts with people in the riverbed. And how many people do you think were accepted any sort of services? Just show me any hands or fingers, whatever you might want to project at me here. Yep, a big goose egg, 0.
Yeah.
That is the issue, right? And imagine, now, unlike a lot of rivers, the San Diego River is this bizarre ownership, right? There's a lot of private property, a lot of City of San Diego parks, a lot of San Diego State now. Well, actually, they don't own the river. Federal agencies, state agencies, you know, other local agencies like Sandag and the Trolley, and there's all of these different ownership. Each and every one of them has their own processes and procedures for addressing and helping people experiencing homelessness. So imagine that, 17 contacts, 0 accepted services. So then what do you do? If you're a private landowner, you own your house is, say, along the river, your home, wherever you might live, and you have 3 people show up and decide to put a camp in your backyard along the river, what do you personally do? Anybody want to weigh in on that one? It's hard.
Is there a way, there's probably a way that you can evict them? So you'd have to go through legal channels maybe, or work with the police to get them off your land?
That's exactly right, Jill. And you call the police, and the police deal with it as a trespassing issue. And so, again, for those of you, and was it Emily or Marie that mentioned your involvement in homelessness?
Marie. Yeah.
You know that that's not going to have a lot of success. So what's going to happen is you grab a balloon, you just pushed a little part of the balloon, and the problem just moves over to the other side of the balloon, right? And it's not a problem, it's people. It's people needing help. But you as a landowner, you are responsible for the condition of your land. And if somebody starts a fire or throws a bunch of debris down there, or something worse happens, as a landowner, you can be held liable for that. So that's the challenge that I think a lot of private landowners are facing along the river. It's like, I don't want this issue. I may be the most compassionate person in the world. I don't have time for some agency to come in and develop a relationship with somebody over months before they're willing to accept services. That's the challenge we're faced with. It's heartbreaking, I have to tell you. So what happens is then that person calls the police. The police say, hey, you got to move along or you're going to be arrested. They move along. Sometimes they want to be arrested actually to get some help, but they move along and they go across the street, or they come back the next day. That's what we're faced with when it comes to the San Diego River. And so it's an interesting conversation because, again, keep in mind who we are as an organization. Our initial value is on the health and condition of the river and its amazing, really globally significant ecoregion. So what do we do? Anybody got any advice? It's a dilemma. I got to tell you, yeah, Megan.
Do you have enough of a relationship? I don't know if anyone does have, a relationship, but have you asked the people who are living there what they do want? If it's not services, do they just want a place that they can set up their encampment? I mean, can you talk to the people who are experiencing homelessness? That's my first question.
Megan, that's a great comment. So one of the wonderful things that we have done over 20 years now, really maybe 16 years of kind of growing a level of effort and knowledge about how to do this, we are very non-confrontational. We never, ever, 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 and if it ever were to happen, then that person or volunteer would never be associated with the organization probably again, unless, there's some training or education that could assist. But we never take people's homes away from them. So that is a reputation that the homeless people know. People experiencing homelessness, I apologize. So that's first and foremost, is that relationship that we have developed. We know many, if not all, of the chronic homeless, people experiencing chronic homelessness by first name. They may not be their real name, but we have a name for them. And so, yeah, we develop those relationships, Megan, and by and large, people just want to be left alone. Sometimes they will tell you that they want help, and we'll arrange for that. I could just tell you story after story. I'll tell you a wonderful, just terrible, actually it has a wonderful ending. But this woman who lived in Phoenix said, she had heard about us in some media story, and she called and she said, have you ever seen my son? And we said, can you describe him? And I checked with my team, and they said, yeah, and they had a name for him. And yeah, we do know him. He's living, and we told the mom, and she said, I just want to know he's alive. And over time, she said, can I keep checking in? Absolutely, please do. And then over time, she checked in, and she said, I'd really like to meet him. Could you help arrange a meeting with him? And we said, we'll try. And sure enough, we were able to go out. It was actually on our property now that we're trying to turn into an education center in Mission Valley. And they met at a Starbucks across the street. So it wasn't that long ago. And she just was so happy, He went back to the river. But I have to tell you, over time, he has now moved to Arizona. He has a family now. And it's still been rough. I think he's been back in jail once or twice, but he's working through it. So on a personal level, those stories I wish were more frequent. Usually, sadly, it's the other way around, where we see people deteriorate before our eyes, and they refuse services. Many of the people have dependency issues. Probably brought on by homelessness, but maybe it was the other way around. And so, what do we do? Let's focus on solutions rather than the tragedy of it all, although out of tragedy often comes solutions. What we try to do is, elevate the issue, keep collecting the data, keep sharing the data, keep being an expert on the people that are experiencing homelessness and drive that issue everywhere we can. I was in a meeting with Nathan Fletcher, Chairman Fletcher, and the other day, and I elevated the issue with him. I said, Nathan, fortunately I can call him that, sir usually, but we have to keep working on this. Our goal is to end chronic homelessness in the riverbed and be part of a solution throughout San Diego and offer whatever expertise we can. And so it's a fascinating issue, and I never thought I would be working in this space, because ultimately, let's think about COVID. But if you go back before COVID, there was the hepatitis outbreak. Remember that?
Right.
Hepatitis outbreak, yeah. I remember the article in the Union Tribune to this day that said, I forget the exact title, but it basically blamed the hepatitis outbreak on the San Diego River. And some of it was factual, in the sense that there was a population of people down there that were exchanging needles, and the Hep A spread, and people died along the river from Hep A. Now, we, much like COVID, we learned pretty quickly that we could have a role in helping. And so once again, our data was part of the solution, where we actually helped the county provide the little restrooms, not restrooms, but the little wash stations. Have you seen those? They took our data and said, wherever there's more than 10 people, we will place one of these. And so that was how they managed that. And so we learned a lot. We were incredibly safe, learned about protocols and things. And so when COVID came along, we continued. We reviewed our protocols, reamped them up, did some additional training, but then we were considered an essential service by the city of San Diego and the city of Santee to continue to document that so people could get assistance. And I have to tell you, we have a little tiny niche in a big world, and some of the frustrations about not getting maybe the support we could have early on financially from some of our partners to continue and actually do a better job was a little frustrating, but we were able to hem and haw, get through it a little bit, and we continue to this day be out on the riverbed 2 to 4 times per week with some small volunteer teams led by staff, always in a COVID environment, to collect that data and share it with the public agencies and the landowners and all the other people that are involved. We are the collaborative catalyst. And what we do, because we said we're not going to rely upon somebody else to do this, we are going to take an active leadership role and make sure that all these people keep talking to each other, from the landowners and whatever. We have relationships with agreements with all of the landowners, both public and private, to walk on their property to collect this data. And that's been our role. It's something we'll continue to do as long as we can. But when COVID came, it was a different animal. It was scary in a lot of ways. And so remember the Santee versus San Diego, right? So let me just share with you a little bit of data, and I'll try this one last time. I'll try to do a little share screen here, and actually let me pull up the right chart first. Okay. We'll try. Okay, can you see that one?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you watch this little thing, okay, the city of San Diego. Now keep in mind that during Hep A, we actually moved up to, after working on it for several years, it's the number of encampments spiked up to 118 encampments along the river in the city of San Diego, 118. So that was 2017, 2018, I think. We worked several years with a lot of partners, and we actually got it down. What you see here in this top line is the total number of encampments in the city of San Diego in the riverbed. And that's 17.5 miles of the river. River's 52 miles long. We were down at one point to 9 encampments right there. 9 encampments. So that is, I don't know why the screen's chopped off there. Oh, there we go. So that was, let's see, where's the 9? Probably the lowest point, right there. Okay. So right there, total of 9. Yeah, the screen's not working so well. But anyways, you can see February of 2020. Okay. So you can see COVID hit, right, in March. These are our real numbers. These are our counts. You can see it spiked up to 61 encampments in a very relatively short period of time. That's a 400% plus increase in homelessness along the river. It was just a stunning number. And what do you attribute that to? I got to tell you what it was. Everything shut down. There was nobody managing the properties anymore. There was nobody talking to people. Nobody, the private landowner calling the police. There was no anything. We were really the only people out there. And we started to see this significant increase. And that's when we brought that information to people and we said, we have to do something about this. But do you remember Santee, right? So now you can see, let me just kind of go through it. So you can see it kind of bounced up and down a little bit and slowly working down. The most recent count, this is April 9th, 1922. I don't know what the 22, there it is. April 16th, so pretty recent. 19 encampments. And that is thanks to people who supported our efforts to continue our efforts to collaborate with partners who could provide services to people and get them out there. We've partnered with Path San Diego, if you're familiar with them.
Yeah.
Path is, we actually partnered with them to physically bring one of their people with our teams. So they accompany now our what we call RAFT, which is our river assessment field team, the people doing the survey work. We take them with us. We also share all of our data with them. And so if they have an area where they want to go work on, we physically will walk them in to the site. That's what we do now. They then do their job, which is they're more of an expert, much more so than us, on how to approach reducing chronic homelessness. It's a partnership that works, and we're very proud of it. And excited about the potential of actually sharing this with other groups and maybe in other riverbeds which have common issues. We can really develop a program. It's pretty cool. And we hope to get the number. But do you remember Santee? Remember that? Remember looking at that map, right? What's the difference? Does anybody have an idea? No. The difference is when the CDC, right, the feds, issued kind of guidance on how to deal with homeless encampments, they said hands off. It's best if they just stay there and not be put into a shelter or some sort of shared living facility. The city of Santee said, okay, we're gonna be hands off when it comes to encampments along the San Diego riverbed. They used to have maybe 2 or 3 or 4, maybe 6 total encampments in the riverbed, and you could see the number. It's just stunning. So we have been working with them to try to change their policy to say, hey, we have a program that works. Please, 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 let us come do our job and partner with somebody like Path or whoever to come out there and begin to address this terrible tragedy. And the tragedy is so terrible on so many levels, but it starts with people, doesn't it? And there's people out there, and I've told people, and this is true, that I've come across dead people that have died. I've come across, in floods, encampments that are underwater. It's just the amount of tragedy we've seen over the 20 years I've done this. It is heart-wrenching, to be honest with you. And God, I mean, even animals, pets, and things like that, we find them that they've been tied up to a tree or something, and then floodwaters come, which is tragic. But most importantly, there's a number of people that can be helped. And the story about that one person I shared, because he was a person that was one of them, if you want to collect them as a them, and you shouldn't do that. But he was somebody who was in that place, and now he's in a much better place. And so there's hope. And that's what we want to do. We want to provide the hope that there are solutions that will work. Then all the other benefits, the public health concerns, right, which are significant. The environmental health concerns, which are significant. The impacts on wildlife, and we have found over time that endangered bird species have returned to an area when we address homelessness. So this holistic kind of approach really starts though with helping people, doesn't it? I'll open up some questions. I'm talking way too much. Megan.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, it's so good to hear from you and hear about your organization and hear about both, you know, the pain and the heartbreak and the hope that can come. I'm always interested in how culture changes, and so I'm interested in. You said initially people were saying, "Get the homeless out of here," you know, kind of a thing. How did you get people to come along with you to saying that this is a human first issue? Did you lose funders? Did people come along with you? How did you, as an organization, shift that?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. And those that know me, I'm way too transparent sometimes, so I'll probably share things I shouldn't. I must admit, after I had worked back in DC to try to get the federal attention to address this as an environmental issue, justice issue, I brought it back to my board of directors and they declined. They initially said, "This is not what we do. You shouldn't be going down this path." I was heartbroken. I understood it, but I was heartbroken. But I don't give up, people that know me. I just take another tack. And I shared with them the data after a year and a half or 2 years. And I said, look, we have to get involved. The absence of our leadership on this issue is having a direct impact on our mission. There's no question about it. And so over time, the board said, absolutely, yes, get involved. So I find that there will always be naysayers. Terrible thing about social media sometimes is you get these just mean-spirited comments that you just have to pick and choose which one you feel like you really need to respond to or not. Usually it's best not to respond to any. But you try also to provide information and data. And the data speaks for itself. There's no question about it. Also, we've been steadfast. We're not blinking on this. You know, we're going to stay with our core value, which is these are people. And I think people after a while see that we're not changing, and maybe they disappear, maybe they change. I don't know which. I'll tell you another short little story. There was in Mission Valley, there's an area of the river upstream to the east of 163, which we call FSDRIP. It's an acronym for this First San Diego River Improvement Project. There's some of you may have been on it. There's a walking path on both sides, and there was some benches. And that's an interesting area because it's primarily private property, and then when it was developed, they created this kind of public easement access as part of their flood control project, and that is a flood control project through there. And the landowners wanted to get rid of benches because why? Because people, unlike them, were sitting on there and talking. And, you know, it was a battle for a while. And we lost that one. They finally had them removed. And we said, well, if you're going to remove them, can we at least put up some interpretive panels to basically to reserve that spot so we can put benches back in the future? And they provided for that. And it just goes to show you that it's an ongoing issue of people. And it's a real issue. If you fear fire, I get it. I understand that, and there have been fires along the river. If it's something where you're concerned about the safety of a kid or a grandkid, I get it. I have my own kid, so I understand that. But you know, over time, we have to have dialogue and discussion, and over time, we have to change our vocabulary, right? So if you notice, I'm still not perfect at it, but I don't call these individuals homeless. Where they live is their home. So they're not homeless, right? And that is something that we really tried to talk about. They are people experiencing homelessness is a term that a lot of people use. That's a little uncomfortable too. But you also go with the language that the experts use. But we first generally just call them people, you know, living along the riverbed is what we say. And part of that, Megan, is you know, just putting more value on them and elevating them as people.
Thank you.
Karen.
Well, so Rob, what your organization is sort of focusing on is when you go into an encampment and offer social services and hook people up and and then they can leave, maybe get placed, in a shelter or something, then what happens to their homes, whatever that happens to be? Is that then when your group comes in with trash trucks and throws, I mean, I'm assuming people take their most valuable things with them, but what happens to the rest of the encampment? And
That's a
what do you
really
do
good
with it?
question. It's a really tough question too. It may not seem that, but so if let's just say from the police perspective, if the police come or a landowner comes in and wants to clean out somebody, they legally are required to hold and store private or personal stuff. Can't think of the word, but
Belongings. Yeah.
so their stuff, right, of value. So we have to make the decision about whether it's been abandoned or not. And we have worked with the city attorney's office over the many years to the point where they trust our judgment. And so when we determine that it's been abandoned, then it's trash. And we organize cleanups, again, largely volunteer but led by staff, to make sure everybody's safe under COVID. Sometimes we have college interns that are helping, and we have some amazing volunteers. They're just incredible people. Very, very safe, very professional, and they clean it up. And because ultimately that was our goal, is a trash-free, clean, healthy river. River that people love and enjoy, and everybody can benefit from. And so the process is complicated because you're not allowed just to kind of come rip out somebody's tent and throw it away, nor should you. That's their personal stuff. And they have a right to it. They have a right to claim it. They have a right to come get it. And it may be the only thing they have. And what we value as a personal possession may not be the same thing. And so they may have something that's a memento or memory of some life, some in the past, that to us might look like trash. We can't make that decision. They have to.
So where do you store their
We don't get
belongings and for
involved
how
in that.
long?
Yeah, we do
Oh, I
not get
see.
involved with storage. So the city, under Mayor Faulkner, who actually did many great things, the city created a storage facility downtown. You might have heard about it. There's actually, I think,
Oh,
two of them
yeah.
now. And they have whole processes where they store people's stuff as long as they're required to. People can still access it and come down and get it. And then at a certain point of time, it's been abandoned and they'll, I guess, dispose of it. Same thing with the landowner. If it's your property, commercial property, you have to make arrangements to store that for a certain period of time and give that person the right and opportunity to come get it, collect it. Good question.
Rob,
Yeah, Joe.
I'd like to have the group hear about just in general. I know today we're mostly talking about homeless, but to understand the whole thing, I think it's interesting to know one of your things is to buy land all the way along the river. Could you share a little bit about how that's been going and how much land you've been able to buy along the river?
Cool. Thanks, Jill. Yeah, it's something, obviously, it's near and dear to my heart. It's where I put a lot of my energy, is conserving something. David Attenborough once said, the surest form of conservation is to acquire something, and that's what we do. So we look for strategic properties for a lot of different reasons that somebody else isn't going to buy, that need to be conserved. The best way to conserve a piece of property is to have an owner who loves their land and takes care of it. And so we never ever buy something from or try to take something, or not that we have the ability to do that, but so we focus a lot of our efforts in the upper reaches of the San Diego River, which is, it really truly is a globally significant natural area. Now we think about the upper river, and you've been up there, it's beautiful and stunning, and in many ways pristine. It is incredibly diverse biology. And a lot of people think it's all Cleveland National Forest, and it's not. There are a lot of private land holdings that predate the forest creation. And so you find these areas which seem like they're conserved, and they're not. And so when I learned that, when the organization first started, one of the first things I did, and I still have the map, I took one of these old paper maps, we used to have, everybody used to have in their car. And I drove around and I marked every place I went, and I still have it. And I traced the river. I got to know it like firsthand. And then I learned what was private, privately owned, publicly protected, maybe it was a water department or whoever owned it. And we started to set out to say, what are the areas from an ecological perspective, as well as trails, watershed protection, even scenic protection, that makes sense to maybe, if there's an opportunity to purchase, we would do. And we've done that. I've completed well over 30 acquisitions now. Maybe it's 40, I don't know. I don't really keep track of those things. But and we've conserved well over 3,000 acres of land. Often these are properties that somebody else chose not to conserve. Like we will usually start with a public agency because we'd much rather have them buy it, and then they often come to us and say, "Can you buy it?" Because we are very nimble, and maybe some of you on this call have know that we'll put a call out to some wonderful supporters and say, "Hey, can you help? Here's why," and literally we'll get $5 or $5, $10 or $100 or $1,000 or even more, and we'll cobble together a community of people that want to conserve that land too, and we buy it. So that's a big part of what we do. The river itself is much more than the water. The river is, really the ecological area around it. That's a big part of our story. So it's the tributaries, it's the critters that go in through the river, the habitat, vegetation, communities, all that stuff. It's all part of the river to us. Because, if you're going to conserve a mountain lion's habitat, you don't just save the river. You've got to save the 80 plus square miles it needs to survive. And you got to make sure that the land that it wants to walk through can continue to walk to get to that larger state park or whatever it might be. And that's the piece of land we buy. So, as you go down the river, we continue to work on that. Cedar Creek Falls, I don't know if any of you have been to it, is a piece of property that was owned by the water district, was going to be sold. And we found out about it. We worked with a partner to buy it. Nobody knows that, except for you, I guess. But we work behind the scenes a lot to get things like that conserved. El Cajon Mountain, beautiful thing, kind of one of the pillars of the East County. When you look east, you see this big, beautiful granite-faced mountain. We bought that, much of it, over 600 acres of it. Why? Because somebody proposed to put a communications tower on it. Again, a lot of people don't know about that, but that's the stuff we do. And then as you come down the river, throughout the river, our goal is for another entity to own and manage that land. But if necessary, we will step in. One of our near and dear projects is a piece of property in Mission Valley, a 17-acre piece of property that a family had, and we met with them and talked, and after a period of time, they donated that property to us. Why? Because they had a common vision. The vision was a place where people could go experience the river, but also create a place where kids could learn about the river and become passionate about nature. And that's our Grant Park project, named after the family that donated the property. And we're working on that and very excited about that. So, but much of Mission Valley has been going through redevelopment, right? The golf course is a good example. So we work very closely for many, many years with the landowners to say, hey, how can we come together with a shared vision, and what role can we do, and how can we help? And so they've set aside more than 80 acres of parks and open space because of our advocacy. And San Diego State, same thing. We did the same thing. And it was really, really wonderful to hear, and everything they talked about, they always said River Park, River Park, River Park. That was us. We were advocating, and I'll take credit for it. I think I should. We were behind the scenes advocating and saying River Park really well. But you know why? It's because when they did polling, the River Park had a higher polling than anything else. People wanted the River Park. They don't know what it is, but they want it. It's pretty cool. And so that's awesome. And that is just 20 years of work of constantly talking about this, having a vision that we help develop with the community. I remember the meeting, going to Julian, going to OB, having all these meetings up and down the length of the river, saying, what's your vision for this river? And that became the vision of a 52-mile-long river park. So the land acquisition stuff, Jill, is near and, as you know, is near and dear to my heart. I see so much value building community in it because everybody can participate. Even if you can't donate, you can let some friend know. You have a sense of ownership then, and you can come out and visit that property, or you maybe took part in one of our virtual tours of the property or something like that. Yes, is it William?
Judy.
Judy, what's this one?
Judy with
There's
yeah,
three
it
of
does.
us
I
here.
know you
Sorry.
wouldn't have known that, Rob. You wouldn't have known
My
that.
hand for Bill.
Yeah. Judy's
Bill
in,
can't raise his hand.
that's right. Judy's in the middle. Specifically related to where SDSU is doing the redevelopment of what used to be the stadium area and whatnot. So do they have responsibility for the river right through that area, or is that somebody else's?
It's the city of San Diego's. So in the purchase of that property, the river was not included in that purchase. That was never actually part of the deal.
I see. So the city then takes ownership. What does that mean to the city? So because they doesn't really mean much. What does that really mean to them?
Well, the city has had ownership actually through their public utilities department for decades. And so what it means to them is they hold on to an asset that they are responsible for. Many years ago, if you've driven by there, you might have seen the start of removing of some of the vegetation. And I laugh about that project because we actually gave the city of San Diego the plan for that. And what they did was they are removing all of the non-native vegetation and restoring natural habitat. Why? Because it was a way for them to what's called mitigate some environmental impacts they had in other locations.
So that should mean, though, that within inches of the river, the city's responsible, and then San Diego State is responsible for the rest, or does that extend 100 yards? Or how far around the river is the city responsible? And then is there a plan to, put a walkway or something where people can walk along the river, benches, that type of thing?
Sure. Great question. So it's actually fairly complicated, but I'll give a simple answer. In the San Diego State Mission Valley Plan, which I'm on their River Park Advisory Committee, they have committed to putting in a river park. So there'll be park land along the river, and that includes a part of the regional San Diego River Trail, which is a public pathway, multi-use bikes and people walking and strollers and whatever else through the length of the property, and that will connect on both sides ultimately with a 55-mile long regional pathway that's being developed. So that is actually most of it is on City of San Diego land. Some of it is on SDSU land, and that is they have committed to completing that mostly within 3 years. That was part of the voter initiative. Yep.
No, that's great. That's helpful just to understand the larger vision and who's responsible for what, or does it?
Yeah, and that's part of our role, is to make sure it doesn't fall through the cracks. That's what we do. We go in all those meetings. We say, hey, we're here. Don't forget about the river. And gosh, let's work together. And oh, by the way, make sure it connects to the property next door. And I use the word gosh a lot. Sorry. And we continue to be there, and sometimes we're louder and more agitated, and sometimes we're softer, and whatever we need to do to make sure that the river has a voice in the process. But it's the same thing with the golf course. It's the same thing with the Town and Country Hotel, which just put in a 3-acre park. It's the same thing with all the projects up and down the river. That's one of the things that we do that is supported by our, we want to call them members, our donors community, is for me. Usually it's me to go in and have meetings with landowners up and down the river when they develop their property.
I think the wonderful part about it is someone has to be the maintainer of the vision, and it's very easy in multiple administrative units, whatever they are, various cities and water districts and whatnot, that they don't claim the vision because their vision has borders. And so you have the opportunity to have the broader vision and keep reminding people of it.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Yes.
There you go.
So one of the things that's of concern, I know it's not right on the river, but I believe it impacts the river, is the fuel depot. So at one time I'd heard concern about you know, uh, much like the storage tanks here in Point Loma had leached down into the ground area, I'm concerned of the river and what the fuel depot there may impact. And
Great.
so,
Yeah, no, great question, and it's great news to share. We have had a great relationship for many years with Kinder Morgan, who operates that fuel tank farm, and through a lot of expense, they in the state of California, it's called the Regional Water Quality Control Board, who's responsible for these sort of water and surface pollutions, surface and groundwater pollutions. They have cleaned up the site. It was actually a condition that they had to do it before they started to demolish the stadium, right? Because they were going to turn up all that dirt. And so they had all of these monitoring wells out in the parking lot for several years, and they've been pumping water into that aquifer and circulating it over and over and over again, and then filtering it and then releasing it back into a little tributary that runs around I-15. As of a couple of years ago, that was completely clean. So the only contamination now is left on the footprint of their specific property. And so that actually is a really good news. It was a really something I was involved with quite a bit for many years. And it's fun to be able to report that there is a positive story there. We still have to work on the land at the fuel tank farm itself, but that's kind of some heavier stuff, and it doesn't move around as much as the other things that were getting close to the river. They used to say it was under the river. It had moved that far, and we always laughed. It's like, what does that mean? But as of now, all of the monitoring results have documented that there's no concern left.
Great news. Thanks.
Yeah, Megan, I'll let you pick. There's a lot of hands, so I don't want to be picky.
Let's go to Linda. Linda hasn't even asked any questions yet, and then we'll go to Julie.
Well, it's good. A lot of people have been asking the ones that I had. Okay, so hello, Bob. I'm so glad to meet you. I am Linda Weber. I am on the Point Loma Association board and a very active member of the Mean Green team. And I work with people to do the same kind of work you're doing, but in Point Loma along we have a bunch of homeless encampments, and I know those homeless people by name, and whole thing, only on a much smaller scale. But anyway, so thank you for your work, and this has been really helpful to know. I have been an active member and supporter of the San Dieguito River Valley Conservancy for many years. They've been going for at least 30 years, maybe longer. So I'm wondering, why did it take so long for a bigger river and in a larger community to get started with a conservancy thing? But you said nobody cared. That's sad. Thank you for getting people to care. So specifically, I'm wondering, you talked about the 55 miles of the biking walking trail, and I wondered, is that the entire length, or and that will be done in 3 years, and is there plans to go more? Because the San Diego River Valley Conservancy has a much longer trail that they've developed and purchased in this, the Coast to Crest thing, and I'm kind of envisioning the same thing for the River Valley. And then kind of connected to that, what do you need to buy next, and how much do you need?
That's one of my favorite questions. Well, it's funny. We're always working on multiple things. I'll give you an example of somebody. I won't mention his name, but there's a wonderful property that we've been working on the last couple of months. It's 165 acres up near a place called Mildred Falls, which is one of, if not the largest waterfall in San Diego County. It's 300-foot waterfall. Now, it's a San Diego waterfall, which means that sometimes it runs and sometimes it doesn't. But when it does, oh my gosh, it's beautiful. It's a spectacular place, and it just roars, and you can stand by it and feel the power of this waterfall going 300 feet down. Just imagine that. And anybody wants to write a check for $1.1 million, we could buy it tomorrow. So we're working on big things like that. We're also working on much smaller pieces. So we're working with a lady right now who wants to sell her property for $10,000. And so, it's more than one thing. Those two is what I'm working on because they happen to be before me today. But we have other things we're working on. We were very fortunate that the Hervey family, who has been a wonderful supporter of ours for many years, also believes in our vision of protecting and conserving the upper San Diego River. And they just offered us a very generous matching gift program for us to conserve 60 acres of one of our targeted areas, including that little 10,000 acres. So we will be, once we have a deal, then we will be talking about that publicly a little bit and trying to match their funds. So on the trail part of it, I laugh about the San Diego River. So there's the San Dieguito River and the San Diego River. And of course, the San Dieguito River means the little San Diego River, right? But it's a little bit longer. It's 53 miles long. We're 52 miles long. We basically go to the same place, the Santa Isabel Open Space Preserve, basically. And the river, San Diego River Trail is a little bit different because it's so urban, right? Yeah. Think about Mission Valley, Mission Bay Park, Santee, very urban. Well, Santee's becoming more urban, but very urban areas, Grantville. So it's very expensive. The 3 years I was talking about was just the stadium's 0.8 miles of the 55 miles.
Yeah,
right?
that's what I was.
So, but there are pieces up and down the river that we've been working on for 20 years. Like the city of Santee is pretty much done with their section. We have all but one little property. Imagine this. There's one little property. It's a big property, and there's one little piece that we need to be able to jump across the corner of a private property to go from Forest Service land to Forest Service land. Why? Because on the other corner of the property, you can imagine 4 properties coming together, is tribal land, and they don't allow trails across their property. So we need this one owner to give us, 40 square feet, and he won't do it. But when we're able to do that, we'll have 17.5 miles added to the river trail. So, there's things like that that are little pieces that need to be completed. If we don't, then we have to do a workaround, which makes it longer. We have assembled all of the land pretty much now from Cedar Creek Falls up to Pine Hills. And we're looking to expand it up to Heisey County Park, if you know where that is. But that will require several acquisitions and/or we'll have to do another route. And then at the same time, we're working with the County of San Diego right now to look for a corridor to connect our trail to the San Dieguito Trail and begin to work on that. So the idea is to not have an isolated trail, but to have a trail that connects to the larger regional networks, actually state networks of trails. As you come down the river, Lakeside, there's a whole bunch of issues going on in Lakeside with sand mining you might have heard about, whole nother discussion. And then Santee's by and large done, Mission Trail's by and large done, but you have a big quarry operation right just downstream of Mission Trails. And until that gets developed, we're going to have a gap. So we have to then work on a workaround, right? And so one of the things we worked on for more than 10 years was the city of San Diego to adopt what they call the San Diego River Park Master Plan. And what that requires in the city of San Diego is that each and every property owner, if they redevelop their property, has to include their section of the river trail. And so we're largely waiting for those developments like the golf course to proceed, because then they are required to fill in their piece. The piece that I'm really working on right now is to get a bridge over the river, which I generally don't support, but in this case it's just for pedestrians and bikes, to connect the Little League field, Sefton Park, over to the Mission Valley YMCA. And once we do that, that's the final piece to get us from the beach all the way out to the stadium.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Julie, I think you had a question. This will be our last question, Julie.
Oh, it's not super soulful question, darn it. So, you spoke about the impact of people experiencing homelessness on the river during times of COVID. I was wondering, are there then monies through the COVID relief bill or maybe the future infrastructure plan that might help along the river? I mean, does the river qualify for this kind of COVID relief funds to help with that?
This has been a challenge for us, I must say. I hesitate to say anything. The River Park Foundation is not considered a social service agency, so we have not been qualified for receiving funds. So the way that we have to do it is through our partnerships. And so we partner with people like Path San Diego and become a contractor to them for those funds. So that's the way we're working on it. We continue to elevate the issue of people experiencing homelessness along the river and in the riverbed through our partnerships. Just had a conversation with Mayor Gloria, who's a good friend, with Raul Campillo, who's the new council member, with Jim. I mean, you go on and on. We have these conversations, and so yes, what we're trying to do is set up a more permanent mechanism. You might have heard about that. Nathan Fletcher talked about forming what's called an EIFD. It's an acronym, but it's basically a funding mechanism that might create another mechanism where we would have a management kind of fund for long-term management of these areas. That's really what our approach has been, just to focus on that lately rather than kind of chasing grants. Of course, we need grants because we're pretty low budget, but those little bit of funds go a very long way for supporting our volunteer teams that are led by staff again. So there's expense and the training that goes involved. So I'll give an example. We can change the world with $25,000. We really can, and $100,000 is transformative for us. So and most of these things are millions of dollars, right? So that's the world we play in. Is we have some very generous people who believe in what we're trying to do and are wonderful partners. So they enable us, and if we had a few more, we could do more. But I can talk forever, so watch out. So I didn't talk about all the education programs and all the other stuff we do.
I'm going to take your word and say, gosh, Rob, what a lovely morning this has been with you. And what a gift. What a gift you are to our community. I feel like I don't know anyone who would have stuck with this mission and vision. So many people would have given up along the way, and you didn't. And that is inspiring. And so thank you for doing that, for shifting your mission when you saw need, and taking care of people in the midst of taking care of the river. It is truly an inspiring story. So thank you so much for sharing it. We're going to have to have you back because we all have a million more questions. So
thank you. I'm happy to come back. You just let me know. I'll make sure it's on my calendar.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I definitely will. And thank you. Can
I end with one last little comment? I just because I again, some of you know me, I am not an I or me person. I really am not. I am a team person, and the people around me are the ones that enable for me to do some cool stuff. And it's everybody from my incredible staff, who's amazing people, to our amazing volunteers. We can't wait to go back to the level of volunteerism we were at, where we used to have 7,000 people would volunteer a year with us. We were down to less than 100 because of COVID.
Wow.
So imagine what we're able to do when we're able to crank it back up again. And those are the people. It is our donors. It is our supporters. It is all the leaders in the community, our amazing board of directors that enables us to do all of this. I get to be the voice and go accept awards, but they are the people that enable us to do some cool stuff.
Well, thanks be to God for all of them. We're so glad and so grateful for this important work. So thank you everyone for coming, and we'll keep having these important conversations. So we will see you all soon.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you, Rob.
Bye.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.